right, so I would like to welcome everybody today to our session. Our guest of honor is Yolaine Stout. Before I introduce her, I just want to make a couple of quick points, and that is anybody who's joining us online today, if you'd like to ask a question at the end of Yolaine's presentation, we'll be opening it up to Q&A. You're most welcome to do so. If you'd like to protect your privacy, you can go ahead because this is going to go onto our YouTube channel eventually. So if you'd like to protect your privacy, you can go ahead and ask the question through chat and we will get to it. If you don't mind being on camera, you can raise your hand and I will get to you. I have a lovely group of people who are here in person. I would suggest any questions, there are pads around, please just write your question, hand it to me if you don't want to be on mic, or you can come up and then you can ask the question into the mic in real time. So now, I want to switch over to our wonderful guest. It's a great honor and privilege to have Yolaine Stout here. I just want to say that about 7 or 8 years ago, before I even knew that Yolaine existed, I came across her on YouTube and saw one of her early presentations and was blown away. And she left an impression, I can tell you. Fast forward a few years, I became involved with IANDS. And now it turns out that Yolaine and I are working together, and we can talk about that at the end of the presentation. So isn't the universe amazing? I came across this lady just by mistake, just by accident, very interested in her story. She left an impression, and years later, I actually am working with her in ways that I could never have anticipated. So it's amazing how things work. But anyway, so Yolaine had a near-death experience around 1982. She was an atheist at the time. It was as a result of an attempted suicide. She was suffering from depression in an abusive marital relationship, suffering from anemia at the time, and going through a lot in her life. And the near-death experience she had made a lasting impression, changed her life. And she's here to tell the story. She's done a lot since then, and she's going to tell us all about it. So let me just hand it over to you. Welcome, Yolaine. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Angie. And that's so great. Isn't it great the way the universe works, that we cross each other's paths, that we're meant to be, working together now. It is. I look forward to talking about that too as well. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, should I go ahead?
Yes, please. Go ahead and get started.
Okay. So I should first start with my background a little bit so you can understand the reasons why I attempted suicide, but also it helps understand the content of my experience itself, which I now believe these experiences are not necessarily due to the physical as much as it is the emotional and spiritual need for the experience, whether it's to be validated or given direction or whatever, a boost forward in our lives. I think it's more psychological, emotional, spiritual. Wish we could do studies on that. I hope to, if that's a goal. But my background, I did come from a very loving family. There was no abuse in my family. They were loving, was huge. I was the oldest of four brothers below me came after me. And we had fun camping, but they were Catholic, and I grew up in a Catholic family, and it was by many accounts, when I later became a high school teacher and I look at these unhappy families, every day I started counting my blessings about how fortunate I was. So you might ask yourself, well, why would I become so depressed to want to kill myself? You'd think that might be something from a more tragic circumstances, but no, I wasn't taking drugs. I wasn't doing anything, harmful that way. But anyway, so I was raised Catholic, and I was growing up in Southern California, and my mother, who was staunch Catholic, wanted to send us all to Catholic school, which they couldn't afford. And we didn't want to go to anyway. We liked our schools. We liked our classmates. We didn't want to change that. So she sent us to catechism. And catechism is religious instruction once a week. You go after school once a week to Catholic instruction. And I was 18. I'd gone through all the catechisms, and now I'm a senior in high school. At the early part of my senior year, the teacher, she wasn't a priest or a nun, but a lay person, said, well, the Catholic Church is the only true religion. And me, actually being the oldest and kind of stubborn and independent and critical, at the same time I had that mindset. I said, oh, wait a minute. I did read the Bible. I don't remember there ever being such a statement in there. In fact, I don't remember reading the word Catholic in the Bible. Can you explain why the Catholic Church then is the only true religion? So she fumbled around. She couldn't answer it. She could tell my classmates were also going like, yeah, right. So she went out in the hallway and got a nun that was passing by, hauled her into the classroom and said, Yolaine here wants to know why the Catholic Church is the only true religion. Can you explain that to her? And she tried to explain it, but I don't even remember what she said because it made no sense whatsoever. And meanwhile, my classmates are getting all riled up, and she went and got the priest. So the priest comes into the classroom, and we ask him the same question. And he started talking about the harmony of the planets and the stars and Peter and the rock and everything. But even though Peter and the rock doesn't mention Catholic, the word Catholic, religion Catholic. And so it was that point, my critical mind, I said, well, you're telling us that. And obviously you don't have a rational response that we teenagers can understand. So what else is false that you're telling us? And I began criticizing the whole religion notion. And then I eventually became an atheist. I just said, this is nonsense. I became very cynical about the church. I didn't want to hear about it. I said, this is nonsense. When we die, we die. It's all ways to raise money. I just became very cynical anyway. So I also asked the priest, one of the questions I'd asked him, I said, so if a child is born in Africa and then never meets a Catholic, cannot get any of the sacraments, why can't he go straight to heaven like Catholics? That's not fair. Why would God create a situation in which a person has no opportunity to become a Catholic if it's the only true deemed religion? So anyway, that was just, one of the questions that none of them could answer. So eventually I got married to an Austrian, and I moved to Austria. And this is in the heart of Catholic country. And everything was governed by the church. I mean, they've had Catholicism, the catechism classes in the public schools, and there were crosses on the walls. And I was a Girl Scout leader for a while, and the girls had never been. That was another thing we did, camping. Growing up, we did a lot of camping, and I was involved in scouting, and I was missing that. So these girls, I thought, well, they've never been camping. I'll take them camping, but say, oh no, we can't go camping. I said, why? I said, we have to sing in the church every Sunday. I said, no, no, you're Girl Scouts. Girl Scouts go camping. We're going to go, you're going to go camping with me. Oh my God. You would have thought I had committed, a felony or something. In March, the priest into our meeting and said, these are my girls. They're singing at the church on Sunday. I said, no, sir. They're going camping with me. These girls have never been camping and they need that experience. They got to be out in God's nature, right? See the beauty of God's creation. Oh, he was furious at me and I didn't care. So anyway, I took them camping. I took them camping at least 6 times and it was a blast. So anyway, so I'm married to this Austrian guy and my happy picture was having a husband who loved me, having a house with a garden, being a teacher, and my students would love me, and then I'd have children and my children would love me and everybody would love me and I'd be happy and the whole world would be happy. And that, I had no illusions about wanting to be rich. I just wanted what my family had when we grew up, which, I thought was a pretty ideal upbringing. And I wanted the same. I wanted to be a mother. I wanted to be a housewife and, teach. And so none of that was happening. None of that happy picture, piece by piece, was getting broken. My husband was emotionally abusive, not physically abusive, but very, very neglectful of me. And I became lonely. I became isolated. I was living away from my family, away from my high school friends, away from everything I knew. And I became lonely. I did become fluent in German, but it's not the same. It's not the same when it's not your culture necessarily. So I became lonely. And then I thought, well, and we also lived in an apartment on the 7th floor, and he never wanted to have a house. He kept, coming up with excuses about why we shouldn't buy a house or move into a house. And so no garden, no house, no husband who loved me, really. And so I thought, I had taken an oath when I got married to death do us part. And my parents never divorced. There was no divorce in my family. I took my vows seriously. And at the same time, I was becoming very anemic. I had horrible menstrual problems where I needed blood transfusions 3 times. Had to get iron shots, and one almost killed me because they put it in too fast. And I was physically now, not just mentally, but physically worn out. But my one glimmer of happy picture remained left, and that was to have children. Well, I had a ruptured appendix when I was a senior, back when I was a senior in high school. And they said I'd be fine. That wouldn't cause any problems, but it did. I wasn't able to get pregnant. So I went to a doctor, and there in Austria, he put some contrast fluid up into my ovaries to see if they were blocked. Well, sure enough, they were blocked. And they said, but we can just blow it open with gas. It's just, the good news is the fallopian tubes are blocked, but we can blow them out. And so I was thrilled that there was now an opportunity that I could get pregnant. Well, that night of that procedure, I woke up with the most horrific pain. And I said to my husband, you need to take me to the hospital now. And he goes, no, you're not in any pain. Forget about it. Go back to sleep. I said, no, take me to the hospital. And, I was not very assertive. That's a whole nother story, very assertive with him. But there I was, very assertive, take me to the hospital. Well, some dormant infection caused me, the short stories caused me to become infertile. So I was not able to have children at the time. There was no, artificial insemination, wasn't it that advanced and wasn't in that realm. And then I was already emotionally depressed, but now I became severely depressed. And I'm lying in bed, day after day. Getting up was like climbing Mount Everest, putting on my clothes. Everything required so much energy to drag myself to school, to put myself in front of students day after day. I physically could not do it anymore. So I said, what's the point of being alive if you can't be happy? My happy pictures on there. I saw no solution. I thought about moving back to the States, but I had no energy. Just the thought of packing up, and I didn't want my parents to know how miserable I was. So because they only endured the fact I was away with the thought I was happy. And so I did, the thought of telling them that, I knew it would break their hearts. And I had no energy to do it. Well, little backstory. I had always been interested in mind-body control, the stories of Africa where they poke you and, they didn't bleed, the people didn't bleed, or the yogis that lay it on the nails and it didn't hurt them, and all this sort of powerful mind over body control. Well, when I was in Innsbruck, before we got married, I was studying at the University of Innsbruck, and they had a course on autogenic training. Autogenic training is strict mind-body control that they were using to teach Olympic skiers, Olympic athletes there. The Olympics were in Innsbruck, I forget what year. And anyway, sports are huge. And the idea of autogenic training was to control your anxiety, control your heart rate, bring your body to focus, bring your mind into dedicated focus, and you get super relaxed. But I remember at the beginning of the class, they said, you really shouldn't practice this at home. It is so powerful. Things can happen. Just practice this in class. And I didn't know what he was talking about. But anyway, I forgot about that. So anyway, I'm so depressed. And I'm trying to think of ways to commit suicide now, seriously. But it couldn't look like a suicide because I didn't want to hurt my parents. So that ruled out taking an overdose, that ruled out hanging, that ruled out, oh my God, so many things. I thought of jumping. We were on the 7th floor of that high rise. I thought of jumping out, but I'm terrified of heights. So I was more afraid of falling. I wanted to die. I just really wanted to end the suffering. I thought that when you're dead, you're dead. And I just wanted the pain to end. There was no point in me being alive. I just wanted that to end. So I couldn't jump out. I thought of driving my car into a tree or, over down a ditch or something. But the thought of what if I don't complete it and I wind up the rest of my life in the hospital, that thought just was horrible. So it had to succeed. And then I remembered autogenic training. I thought, oh, it's about controlling your heart rate. And then I thought of the indigenous people that, could bring that much body of control. And I had been reading this book because I'd always been interested in anthropology anyway. I had read about Native Americans and indigenous peoples felt like when they become too much of a burden on their tribe, they would go off somewhere and lay down and will themselves to die. And I thought, there's the answer, right, for me. I'm going to do autogenic training every single night. I will will myself to die. And in the morning, they will just find me dead in bed, and it won't look like a suicide. There won't be any pain. There won't be anything. I'll just be gone. And I couldn't wait. So I look forward every night to getting back in bed and going through the autogenic training, relaxation techniques, and controlling. And I got pretty good at it, already in class. I was able to make my left hand turn cold and my right hand turn hot. I could make tingles happen. I could feel myself becoming super heavy and not have any thoughts in my head whatsoever. No thoughts, zero thoughts. And it's, not easy to do. But I was there. And so night after night, I did this. And I don't know how long it took, months, weeks, maybe. But one night I found myself in a void. And it was completely dark. And I look around and there was nothing. And I thought, well, I can't be dead because I'm thinking. This can't be it. I'm thinking. So I went back to trying harder. And then all of a sudden, and in the darkness, it's the middle of the night. I don't know what time. My room was completely black. But then it was filled with light. All of a sudden, like 1,000 floodlights have penetrated my room. It was incredible. Now, I looked out the window and the sky was blue. And I'm going, whoa. And I looked, there was a big mirror at the edge of our bed, and I could see myself in the mirror. And I am blind as a bat without my glasses. I'm so nearsighted, always have been, that I was amazed I could see myself clearly my reflection clearly in that mirror. And I could see the bedspread, how clear that was. And the hallway door was open. I looked down all the way down the hall, and it was clear and lit up. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've entered another dimension here. There's another dimension. I forgot all about suicide and depression at that point. I wanted the world to know about this. I said to myself, whoa, there's another dimension. People have to know about this. Oh, this is crazy. I'm going to get up and explore. I wonder if I can listen to people's dreams. I was hearing voices like 360 degrees, and I realized I'm positive those were people's dreams. And I said, you know what? I'm going to listen to see if my husband is dreaming. And then I'm going to wake him up and tell him what he was dreaming. And then he'll know I've been somewhere or whatever. I said, I gotta, people gotta know about this. So I go to move up. And at that moment, when I was getting up, another light filled the whole space, everything. I disappeared into this light. And it was so warm and embracing and full of the love. I had a loving family, but this love was pure and unconditional. It knew me. There was no it there. It was just light, but yet I felt home. And I said to myself, oh, this is home. I don't want to ever leave. This is home. no worries, nothing. I just want to stay there forever. And slowly that light disappeared, and I'm back in my lit up room. It was still lit up. And I turn to my side and I see white robes standing there. There was a man standing in white robes. And I wasn't shocked because I was still in that same, I thought about it later, at the time I wasn't thinking this. I was still in that same state of awe over it all, love and peace. So what didn't scare me, it was, so there's this man standing there with white robes, and I look up into his face, and that was Jesus looking down at me with the most brilliant blue eyes that I've never ever seen here ever. And his face was full of love and mercy and no shame or any judgment or anything to me. And then he said to me one sentence, but he didn't move his lips. He said to me in his voice, in English, don't waste your life thinking you're not loved. And when he said the words, your life, it was like this expansion of sparkles. And I fully felt to the depth of my being that my life was precious. But not only my life, but everyone's life, including that kid in Africa. And I just, it faded away and my room went black. I'm still in this state of awe. But I realize I'm not in my body. I wasn't far out of my body, but I was not in my body. And it sucked me back in. And the feeling was so unpleasant. It was like feeling like you falling back into black mud, backwards. And it's sucking you and closing you in this black mud. And it was painful. And I wanted to go back. I wanted to leave again. And it didn't come back. And a little bit. I mean, there was a little inkling like this is always here, but nothing like that. And not even since then. But I had one sentence from an authority figure, and I asked myself, why did Jesus come to me? And I think because of my stubborn nature, I needed an authority figure, someone I was going to trust. I don't know, because I wasn't Catholic and I didn't believe in that, but here he was. And so I had that one sentence, don't waste your life thinking you're not loved. And I was an English teacher, so I tore that sentence apart. I had to understand all of its ramifications. I had to understand what he meant by that. And the don't waste your life, your precious life, meant to not waste something meant my life had a purpose of some kind. It had a purpose. And it wasn't about seeking love. And later I extrapolated that to mean not seeking any feeling outside of ourselves, that it's a feeling we cultivate within. And we're responsible for that feeling that we have. And I was responsible. So he's telling me, it's not your circumstances, Yolaine. It's not the fact that you couldn't have children. It's not the fact that you're in an abusive relationship. It's not the fact you're lonely and you're anemic. It's none of that. I was wasting my life the way I was thinking, that my life had no purpose. There was no value to my life. And I thought, oh, and that by wasting it, so being in depression meant I was wasting it, because depression was, for me, was a lot of it feeling sorry for myself. I'm a victim. I'm a victim of my circumstances, and there's nothing I can do about it. But here it's saying, empowering me to say it's my responsibility to take charge of my thinking and thereby get out of my depression. I had no clue how to do that. I didn't know what my purpose was. I didn't know how my thinking was off. I had to learn in bits and pieces along the way. So no, it didn't snap me out of my depression immediately, but it gave me a path forward out of it, a long path out of it. And so I took that journey. So I left so the interesting thing was, I had so much love that I thought I could make my marriage work. And it didn't. Nothing I tried worked. And I finally said, well, he's not happy with me here. I don't know what purpose I have here. I want to go home, reconnect with my family. And the minute I thought that, the millisecond, I thought, I'm going to leave this marriage and I'm going to go back home. That's when the depression for that moment left. Like that. I went from being exhausted and unmotivated to boom. I'm gone. No, I wasn't unmotivated at that point. I was motivated, but I realized that our thoughts, our very thoughts are choices, that every single thought we choose is heard and is either in alignment with our purpose or it's not. So I felt like I'm supposed to go home. If I'm now filled with this feel-good energy and the depression is gone, it must be a sign. Now I believe, okay, so there's that reality was more real than reality. So life here is a dream, right? That we're practicing and we're trying to find our purpose, and we're doing all these, work on ourselves, doing all this work on ourselves. So I realized thoughts, the power of thinking, which it made perfect sense. So I left him and I moved home. I divorced him and moved home. Well, there's a longer story, but it's not pertaining. So the way I feel now about the further thing about choice is, based on our thoughts, we also have a belief system, and that belief system is either aligned with our purpose or it's not. And if we're one of the fallacies of those beliefs is if we look at bad things happening to us as punishments, we're missing the point. That nothing out there can make us feel in here something that, and it's not a punishment. It's nothing we did wrong. It was an opportunity. How are you going to choose to think about it? Are you going to become disempowered and a victim to it? Or are you going to, so I had to learn. That was a long journey I went through therapy about, why did I get this abusive marriage? I don't want to be putting out that vibe anymore. That helped a lot with things. 2 different kinds of therapy that I went to, because I really want to understand this whole depression thing and not ever go there again. So after some therapy and not being depressed, I met my soulmate. And we met through a Jewish matchmaker, although neither of us are Jewish. And we met over the phone. And it was funny. It was Dr. Sewell's. And I called after about 7 dates or 8 dates that he'd set me up with. I go, Dr. Sewell's, those men you're sending me have nothing to do with what I told you I'm looking for. I'm looking for a man who has a family. I'm looking for, I want to still be a mother, right? I want to have someone who thinks about thoughts and, is a little deep and whatever. And these guys, no. So he sent me Dave. And it turns out Dave had also called that week and complained to him about the women he was getting. So he put the two complainers together, and it was the match made in heaven, literally. We fell in love after a 3-hour phone conversation. Everything he said just clicked. I felt his love. I felt his energy. And when he said he had boys, there were so many clinchers. That was a big one. We talked on the phone for 3 days, so 3 hours each, 9 hours before we even knew what we looked like, and it didn't care what he looked like. But I met him, and he said he felt the same way about me, that everything I said clicked with him, and it was like lightning struck him. And we were married for 27 years. We were happy raising boys, and I did have some bouts of depression during that. And as soon as I felt it, that I want to nip it in the bud. So I did go to another therapist, and I said, I gotta understand why I'm depressed, because I'm happy. I'm in a happy relationship. I got a beautiful home now and a garden and all the trappings that I thought I would want to be happy, but I'm not. So I guess I still have something to learn about that still. And in the therapy, he said, well, describe to me a typical day. And I told him, it's teaching, raising kids, having a new house, new husband, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and you're not stressed? I go, no, I'm not stressed. He goes, honey, you're stressed. You have chronic stress, and that's causing your bodies can only take so much stress. And so you have to start meditating or do something to relax, bring down all those stress hormones. And so, because I didn't want to take medication, I knew it had something to do with, I had to work up here on it. And he said, you have to meditate and bring down those stress hormones. You got to recharge your batteries somehow, some way. Now, I had avoided meditation because I didn't want it. It was a result of depression that I had been doing it before, and I didn't feel right about doing it. But I took his advice and I started meditating, but not too deeply. And then it took care of that. I was actually also having some panic attacks, and that took care of that. And so I learned about stress, the issue of chronic stress, and to listen to my body for those signals of being stressed, tightening up your muscles or gritting your teeth, or, it manifests differently in everybody, different how their stress is. So he taught me to listen to my body more about the signals of stress. And I realized, maybe it's also a way to find my purpose by listening to my body, listening So what is our purpose? It has to do with love, not seeking love out there, but finding it within. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It's doing what we loved in service of others, whatever that may be. And what we love, we feel it. I describe it as passion, it'd be fascination, interest, love, compassion. These feelings within that we often ignore and listen to our thinking heads and suppress all the energy and the emotions, and we push it down, we push it. Well, it's going to emerge some way that is stressful to the body. So that's why I say where we're stressed, I now call depression battle fatigue. And battle fatigue is two forces or more battling each other. So it could be your higher self versus earthly expectations. Specifically, it could be in a relationship or something. So listening to our body, listening to our hearts, listening to that energy over what we're thinking is happening out there is critical. So I tune in all the time. Like my body tells me what to eat, what not to eat. My body tells me when to exercise, what muscles to stretch. So I realized what my passion was writing and helping people through depression, finding their purpose. And so I've been writing a lot. I quit teaching. The teaching was very interesting because I taught remedial reading. And remedial reading, kids lost their sense of passion and interest. They were not motivated. And I had to find out what they were interested in so I could hook them up with a book they'd like to read. And that was so rewarding to do that. So that's what I'm interested in, is empowering people with that. Well, so I'm living this life, and then my husband got sick. How are we doing on time?
We're good. We're good. You keep going. We have another 45 minutes if you want, until we can open it up to Q&A. Up to you. We've got plenty of time. Okay,
because I lose track of time. Usually, I used to be good at it, but I don't know anymore. Anyway, so my husband one day started mispronouncing words. We were out in the garden. He said, what are these plants called? What are these plants? And I said, cucumbers. And he goes, cucumbers? And he goes, what's this? I said, it's acorn squash. And he couldn't say it at all. So I became alarmed. I went in and I looked it up, and they said, get to the hospital immediately. Could be a brain tumor or a stroke. So I told him, we're going to the hospital. Put my foot down. We're going to the hospital. He didn't want to go. I said, no, we got to check this out. It's probably nothing, but we need to check it out. There's a reason you can't pronounce these words. So we went, and they could not believe the size of the tumor he had in his brain. It was so large that all the ridges were on one side were gone in the CAT scan or whatever they did. And he couldn't believe he didn't have the headache from hell. And they wondered why I couldn't bring him earlier. I said, he didn't have any other signs that he had this. And they gave him 3 months to live, and they couldn't operate on it. It was too large, but they had to do a biopsy to determine if it was cancer or what. And it was during the biopsy, my mother called me, and she said, Yolaine, I want you to know I put a cross at the foot of my bed, because she was bedridden at that time. She had a lot of illnesses going on. And she said, I put a cross at the foot of my bed so I know I'll think of you and Dave every time I look at it. And I want you to know I have the most powerful prayers in the world. Now you tell that to Dave. And I said, okay, Mom, I will. And so then I'm in the waiting room waiting for my husband to come out of the biopsy. And as I'm waiting, I get another phone call, and it's my mother's caregiver. And she said she passed away. She's gone. And I said, what? And my mother, right after that phone call with me, she said she reached over to my dad's hand and they both said a prayer for you. And right after that prayer, she was gone. And then right after that, the doctors came out and said my husband had glioblastoma multiforme. And it's they gave him 3 months to live. So I said, Mom, your prayers are needed now. Well, a lot happened, and he lived for 3 years. And because we fought like hell, I went on a ketogenic diet with him, and we did prayers, and we did all kinds of, things. And doctors couldn't believe he lived that long. But it finally took him. And my husband had the same spirituality as me, and that was key, that we had that. He had a love of poetry. And he would recite this to me. Now it sounds like a side note, but it comes in, it's important later. He goes, it's a poem by Emily Dickinson that said, lightly stepped a yellow star to her lofty place, loose the moon her silver hat from her lustral face, all of evening softly lit as an astral hall. Father, I observe to heaven, you are punctual. And he'd recite that to me now and then. And I, as a teacher, I think punctual being on time, right? Well, anyway, fast forward back to my husband had passed, and I was still sleeping downstairs because he could no longer go upstairs to our bedroom. And I had brought down boxes of things of ours, and I was going to bed, and I was tormenting myself over, did we do enough? Did I do enough? Did we see the right doctors? Because there were so many people with ideas of what to do for him, and you get confused about stuff. And I was torturing with the thought, and even though I knew, because I was president of IANDS, and I knew, that about near-death experiences for many years. When it's your time, because to near-death experiences, they say, you got to go back. It's not your time. So I knew this, but I could not accept that it was my husband's time. So anyway, I'm going to bed, and I kicked a box, and I felt something had fallen out of it. So I went back, turned on the light, and there on the floor, in my husband's handwriting, face up, is this poem. Father, I observe to heaven, you are punctual. And I got it. I went from feeling horror over the, punishing myself with the thought I didn't do enough for him, to everything is in divine timing. And I went to bed, and I was in a state of awe and gratitude for that for that sign that he had sent me. But he wasn't done with me yet. I looked up. All I could see were stars and planets and galaxies of many different colors. And the whole ceiling, all the walls, everything, I was immersed in this astral hall. And a critical mind steps in and goes, well, that's coming from my brain and it's projecting out and I'm hallucinating. It's projecting. I'm in such an emotional state, it's causing this hallucination. So I put my hand up to block it, and it blocked it. It wasn't coming from my brain because the stars would be on my hand, right? But they weren't. It was blocked. And not only that, but all around my hand was this filament of white light and sparkles. And I just held my hand up and looking at the stars and this light for, I don't know, I lost track of time. I would just lay there as long until I fell asleep at some point. And I was just so grateful. My husband was a research scientist, and he loved everything. He loved the skies, the comets and the stars, and he was a molecular chemist. I don't know if you can see that lower picture on the left, but that's one of his structures. And above that is the solar eclipse. So he was into all things small, stars small and large. So it made sense that he would send me this vision and poetry. I mean, it was all of this. I never did anything in a small way, but I have to back up to when he was dying. Sorry, I couldn't do it before. I was emotional. So we were in the hospital, and they said he needs to go to hospice. There's nothing more we can do for him. And I didn't know how to break it to him because he was we both had fought so hard. And I thought, I'd read about, I knew hospice nurses and Maggie Callanan. I knew her. I read her book, and I knew all about not all about deathbed visions. So I prayed for him that he would have one to comfort him as he was going. And the next morning, he was sitting up in his bed, and he's pointing to the sky like that, to the ceiling in the hospital. And I said, you okay? He goes, you don't see that? And he was talking, not clearly, but I could understand. He says, you don't see that? And I knew then he was having a deathbed vision, that my prayers had been answered. I said, and what are you seeing? He said, mountains. And I burst out crying because in that 9-hour phone conversation, he told me the mountains were his spiritual home. That was one of the things that clicked, because I love the mountains too, hiking and camping. He was seeing mountains. And I said, what else do you see? And he said, white feathers, music. I said, angels? And he said, angels. And I asked him if they were saying anything to him, because I knew from Maggie and from others, you can get a sense of how much longer they have, And I said, are they saying anything to you? And he said, no. Are they, so music, are they singing? No. Or are they playing musical instruments? And he said, yes, musical instruments. Well, my husband also loved listening to classical music. So he was seeing all the things he loved that he was being shown. And he goes, it's real. I said, honey, I know it's real. I said, but it's only meant for you to see, not for me. I said, how do you feel? Does it bring you comfort? And he goes, oh, yeah. And so we went into home hospice, and he's lying on the couch in our living room. And it had been 3 months since then. And now he's looking up again from side to side. I said, are you seeing your mountains again? He said, yes. I said, do you think God is calling you home? And he nodded, yes. Do you want to go home? He said, yes. And then I had to give him permission to go because he fought so hard. I said, it's okay. You can go. Your boys will be fine. Your lab will be good. Everything will be good. And you'll get to hike your mountains again. You'll get to explore the stars and the planets. And we'll be each other. We'll see each other. And I said, you know how my mom sends me pennies? I want you to send me nickels so I know it's from you, okay? And an hour later, he closed his eyes and didn't talk after that. And then an hour later, he breathed his last breath. And I went to therapy again, to grief therapy. And I said to her, I said, I was president of IANDS, and I know when it's your time, it's your time. I know that. And I know he's in a happier place. I know this to the bottom of my heart. I said, but I'm grieving. It's 8 years now since he passed, and I'm still grieving. He said, the depth of your grief is measured by the depth of your love. It's the same. It's your heart's way. You can think all this in your head, but your heart is where the love is, and it's also where the grief is. And I said, yeah, that helps. And so anyway, he's come to me in different ways, in different, little signs here and there. Like once I was in a thrift store, I like to buy yarn, and I have a ton of yarn. All of a sudden, over the inner, it's funny, I feel like I listen to my body and I felt something's going to happen. Something synchronistic, something is going to happen. And sure enough, our favorite song, his favorite song, Mission Lace, came up. And I'm listening to our favorite song, his love song to me. And I was and put in a state of awe, and everything turned magical around me. And I turned the corner, and there on the capstone were angels, figurines, all playing a different musical instrument. I had to pick those up. I bought them. I have them. And then a book popped out at me on the shelf. It had to do with angels. I said, I want to buy this book too. And the woman behind the desk, nobody else was in the store. She said, I almost bought that book. That book, I almost bought that book. I said, here, you keep it. You keep it. I've got my angels here. And we had a long conversation, and she was feeling depressed, and I kind of talked to her about that, and not the whole story, but anyway, so that's kind of it on my story of my near-death experiences and depression, and my husband's experiences. There's a lot more, but I don't want to take up all the time. I do want to talk about ACISTE a little bit.
Do you want to tell us about your time with IANDS, and then how that Mhm.
Yeah, for IANDS and then ACISTE. So um, while I was, after we had built our house and living there, I had suppressed my near-death experience, didn't want to talk about it with anybody. And I thought I was alone with that experience. I didn't know there were other people who had had that. I didn't know what to call it, even. But you know how things magically happen. I came across this book. Actually, it was a fiction book, but it described delight. And I think it was called The Pale Horse or something. It was old novel. And it described the light in this fiction book, but I said, oh my God, someone else has been there. I'm not alone. This person, the writer, Catherine Porter, I believe, she must have had an experience like this with the light. And so, but I still couldn't talk about it because I still didn't want my parents to know I even attempted suicide. So I wasn't going to bring up and I was a public school teacher. You don't talk about those things as a teacher. So I was teaching my English class. These were seniors, and there was always this shy kid in the room, and tall, lanky, wallflower type of kid would be by the side, and his name was David as well. And his family won the lottery, and then all of a sudden he got millions of dollars, and he was out buying race boats and race cars and living life on the edge. And now he's the most popular kid in school, having wild parties and drinking and pot and I don't know what else he was doing that he told me later. But he one day the kids came back and they said, Dave's been life flighted to Sharp Memorial Hospital. They only give him 5% chance of living. And I said, what? Yeah, he had another scuba diving accident. He shot up too fast and they helicoptered him out from the ocean over to the hospital. I said, oh my gosh. I said, so we're not allowed to pray in school, but we can do a moment of silence and send our best thoughts to him. And so we did. The next day, he comes walking up the hallway as calm as you please, only he didn't have any white left in his eyes. They're all red. And he's still wearing his hospital braces. And I said, David, you need to get back to the hospital right now. You need to get back there. And he goes, no, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. I said, I want to talk to my class. Can I talk to my classmates? And this was not the David I knew. This was not the David I knew. I said, I was dumbfounded. I said, okay, sure. So as calm as you please. He went and he pulled up a chair to the front of the room and he tells his near-death experience. And it was a similar message to mine. Don't waste your life. Your life is a precious gift and you're treating it recklessly. Now go back and tell your friends who are also recklessly living. You could have heard a pin drop in the classroom. And a week later, he disappeared. He didn't even stay for graduation. And he was my motivation to start talking about it. He was brave enough to talk about it. I left teaching and I got a hold of a book, happened to Lessons from the Light from Ken Ring. And I'm reading about all these. Now I had a name, a near-death experience. And I saw the last chapter was Bev Brodsky from San Diego, where I was living. And I looked her up. And one thing led to another. I was helping her with her local group, like you are, Angie. She was in San Diego leader for many years. And from the leaders' meetings, they asked me to join the board. And I was on the board for 6 years, and then they asked me to be president. And it was there during that time that I realized people are suffering from challenges after their near-death experiences. And also I learned that half the people that were contacting us weren't near death. They were having the same experience, but they were not near death. I felt I had an obligation. My heart was being called to help these people who were having trouble integrating their experience. My troubles were before mine. These were people having trouble after, with finding purpose and with integrating the experience. My heart, IANDS wasn't ready to go there, but I felt we needed to train mental health professionals. We need to research their problems, their issues. I wrote an article for the journal called The 6 Major Challenges Faced by Near-Death Experiences, based on interviews I had done at a retreat with Linda Jacqueline. I interviewed 25 experiencers and posted broke all the issues that they brought up, broke them into 6 major challenges. And then Bruce Grayson says, we got to publish this. And they published it. And then one thing led to another. We need to help these people through these challenges, and others. Who else? This is just the tip of the iceberg. We need to do something. Who's doing this? Who's helping them? Nobody. Really. I mean, there were a couple of people that didn't know about near-death experience that thought they did. But so I broke away and I formed ACISTE, the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. And I was back in 2009, I want to say. Still involved with that. And we've trained over 50 mental health professionals, have conferences all around. We stopped doing that to convert our conference material and new research into online classes, to do certification for mental health professionals, social workers, life coaches, and spiritual directors, spiritual counselors, 3 different tracks. And so we're doing the spiritual counselors first, getting all those courses online. And that's when Angie joined us. And both of us are working together. She's the perfect person to help with compiling all the policies and procedures that need to be done, and the information, the curriculum that is needed to, of course, do no harm to experiencers, but also develop tools in recognizing and helping experiencers struggling with spiritual issues following their experience. And we think of near-death experience as being part of a spiritually transformative experience. So we think of that as the umbrella term that includes near-death experiences. And she's done a remarkable job, and it's just a pleasure of having her work with us. And we're still moving forward. This is still a passion of mine, and it probably will be till I die. I don't know. And writing, I love writing. I'm writing also an afterlife comedy, a script. I just love it. It's fun. I'm having so much fun with that.
As far as ACISTE is concerned, just for the benefit of our audience, there are a lot of counselors out there. There are a lot of spiritual therapists out there. Why do you think that ACISTE needs to come in and offer its own training?
Well, if you look at Psychology Today, which is a big referral directory, they don't have a category they have transpersonal psychology. But if you read the curriculum, the studies, the textbooks for transpersonal psychology, it barely mentions it. I mean, it even avoids the word spiritual. It could be anything. It's not directed at experiencers and their particular issues. So that's the only way an experiencer can find help. So we have a directory on our website where experiencers go and find someone that can help them. And we have listed of the different approaches, their philosophy, what kinds of specific issues they might be working on. And it's working. I mean, we have several thousand people on our own personal Facebook page for experiencers only. People find each other now. Whereas before the internet, people weren't finding, help. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot bigger struggle. It's getting better, but it's still no other organization focuses on the needs of experiencers. Experiencers are dealing with unique issues. If you take them to a person who hasn't been trained, they could be pathologized, they could be invalidated, they dismiss it. And let's look at suicide, for example. A lot of people who've had near-death experiences want to commit suicide. They want to go back home. They can't handle being here. It's one of the major challenges. They don't know why they're here. And think maybe God played a mean trick on them, and they just want to go home. And there's books and stories after stories about people who tried to commit suicide after their near-death experience. Now, if you go to a standard person trained in how to deal with a suicide attempt, it's not going to work because experiencers are going somewhere. Suicidal people who've not had this experience just want their pain to end. They want it to end. So they got to deal with their life. So it's a completely different issue. So it could cause harm. So the training just for that alone is critical.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of good therapists out there, but this is a particular specialty. Most therapists don't know what the near-death experience is. They don't know what spiritually transformative experiences are. So they can be very well-meaning, but they don't have the training. So somebody who's had an experience goes to them, a lot of harm can be done. Just where the medical community, when people are revived, don't know how to handle it and can do a lot of damage and shut people down. Maybe, in the old days, even put them in the psych ward for a while.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's
happened. Yeah.
Is really important to add on to any therapist's training, because it's a specialty to sensitize them to this issue, that it's very real, and then to help people integrate and help them through their issues. So that's why ACISTE is an amazing organization, because it is serving a particular demographic in ways that nobody else is serving. And moving from in-person training, which is what you've done traditionally, to online training is phenomenal, because it's going to open it up to the world of therapists who are interested, who can then, at their own pace, go through the training and become certified to help experiencers in general. We need so many more therapists to have this specialty training.
And the population is much larger than we realize. There's just a lot of people still don't talk about it.
And it's getting larger. It's getting larger. Not fewer people having experiences. There are more and more people having them.
Yeah. Some statistics say up to 30% of the population, 35%, depending on which definition you use. We need to do our own study, but it, could be up to a third of the population. And we've seen, like you said, it's growing. And why? I think, my personal opinion, there's a spiritual need for it. There is a psychological, emotional, spiritual need for it, especially in the United States, where people have, are a consumer society, not knowing their purpose. They think their purpose is out there, happiness is out there. They've been conditioned into thinking that, and it never works. It becomes like an addiction. Yeah, and also wanted to mention another one of the issues that needs training is for marriage and family therapists or people working with relationships, because the changes that occur are so profound that you're not married. You happened to me, could no longer be with that person at all. they're not on the same wavelength
I think the
anymore
divorce
at
rate
all.
is in the 80% or above for experiences after they come back in their marriages. They are just different people.
Yeah.
Their values have changed. They've been completely transformed, and the spouse more often than not can't handle it. They're not as materialistic. They don't have the same values. They don't have the same goals. Everything changes, and marriage falls apart. And yes, you're absolutely right about that. I think this is a good time to sort of invite people to start with their questions. I do have a question for you with regard to the spiritually transformative experience as being your umbrella term and near-death experience being one sort of subset of that. Could you just explain what you understand? Give us examples of what you consider to be a spiritually transformative experience, because it runs the gamut, and depending on who you speak to, it can be a different definition.
Well, I think a lot of the definitions, it's like Kundalini experience or out-of-body experience or peak experiences. I mean, they go by hundreds of different names. Mystical experience, transpersonal experience, exceptional human experience. I could go on and on and on. But our definition really is simple. It's defined by the person and the impact that it's had upon them, not labeling their experience. Is not the label that matters so much as the impact, that what happened during the experience, which I feel the content of which, what happened is determined by what led up to it. In my case, for example, might not work. That message might not work to somebody else, right? It had to work for me, for that particular time and point for me. So it's about that person's own did they feel it was spiritual, and did it change them?
When you say spiritual, do you mean metaphysical? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, we leave it up to the experiencer to define spiritual for themselves. And it's a sort of not a top-down theoretical approach with labels and diagnoses and names, but people interview experiencers and how they define it. And also they're finding their own purpose and finding their own, what that means, and their own integration process. And they don't all go through the same challenges in the same order and different things. And so spiritual emergencies is a different one. So it really is a simple, an experience that the person feels was spiritual, and it's caused changes. There's a definition I like by W.I. Thomas. If men describe their circumstances as real, then they are real in their experience. So in other words, if you're suffering consequences of something had to have happened. And so that change, those consequences is part of that transformational process. And so the names don't matter so much. What anybody wants to call it, let them call them that. And that's part of our training, actually, is to not label, use the person's own vocabulary. Like if they say, I saw Jesus, don't say, oh, you mean your higher self, which was actually said to me. There are subtle forms of invalidation like that. So we don't want to,
absolutely. One of the rules of therapy, therapy 101 is you take the client wherever they are. If they're giving you their account of something, that's their reality. Whether it really happened in the way that they're saying it did or whether it didn't, you have to treat it as real because it is real for them. Otherwise, you get into you're denying, you're denigrating, you're belittling. You have to take the person where they are. So it absolutely makes sense.
And
I
if
have
it's dismissed or invalidated, then along go the consequences are invalidated as well. You can't be suffering consequences from something that never happened.
absolutely.
Right?
I have a question with regard to suicide because that's one of the fascinations regarding your near-death experience. What would you say to particularly a young person, but anybody actually, who is very much in the 3D world, not necessarily in the spiritual world, not necessarily metaphysical, who is just down and out on their luck and just ready to give up? Obviously, those of us who are on the spiritual path, we know that there's so much more, and that trying to end your physical life is not the solution that people think it is.
No.
They think, okay, I'm going to do myself in. That's going to take the pain away. I cease to exist. It is a liberation. It's a getting away. But we know better than that, right? In the sense that from what near-death experiences have told us, who've touched the other side and come back, that, there's a plan here, your pre-birth plan. That there's a purpose here, that you're checking out early on, messing up other people's plans who have agreed to come into this existence with you, that it can actually lead to dire consequences, not dire consequences because there isn't punishment, but you go to a place, you have to stay there till, I believe, everybody whose life you've touched has been kind of lived out. You may choose to come back and tackle the same issues. So in many respects, it's not the answer you think it is. It can lead to greater complications and a more difficult time if you choose to come back. Could you speak to some of that so that people get a sense of,
serious, very serious thing. There's a couple of things. A couple of things is that, like you said, to meet the person where they're at. And for a person who's an atheist, for example, telling them what's going to happen or not happen on the other side, they're just, But if a person is just still in the considering stages of it, to talk about their fascinations and their purpose, like try to find who they are authentically. Because obviously stuff outside of them or internal or whatever the circumstances are, they're reacting to that, as I was, just we're responding to that. But to empower the individual earlier than the deep suicide, that's a different thing altogether. Once, I don't think anybody could have done anything for me when it got to be when I'd made up my mind. I mean, I was too far gone. I would not have asked for help. I would not have I didn't talk to anybody about it. But early on, maybe an intervention could have happened, the early signals, and they could be losing motivation, not wanting to go to school, not, changes in behavior, stuff like that. Addictions, they're escaping their lives because their lives are miserable in some way, finding out what that is and empowering that individual to realize they're much more than anything out there, that they can actually change their lives by changing their thoughts. They can change what happens. Actually, we can change within us the power to change us into peaceful, joyful, wonderful people, that when you get to that state, magic starts happening. And they may not believe that if they're, I think depressed people actually, at least a segment of them, are deep thinkers. They're not shallow. They think deeply about life and life's purpose and values and why am I here and what those philosophical, spiritual questions and they need a tribe somewhere where they can express it and to talk about it and to feel like they belong somewhere and not isolated. And that may be a first step in there to catch it before it becomes suicidal, before it becomes deep depression. And in deep depression, a lot will depend on what their belief system is, but to have to work. I'm not an expert at that. I'm not I'm not a mental health professional. I do research, but there's a lot that could be done there as well. But I don't, the end stage, I think there needs to be training for people who call the hotline, for example, to know why, their motivations for it, and hear them, listening to what's going, because everybody's going to be different. There are people who do believe and they want to go home to their family. Maybe all their family's gone. They're alone. I think isolation is a big part of it. And it doesn't help to be on the phone all day. That's not a substitute for being with community, being with family or friends that get you.
I'd like to open it up to Maria, who has a question. She's raised her hand. Would you like to speak your question, Maria?
Thank you. Yes, very much. Thank you. I have a very strong accent. If you need me to repeat something, please, I don't mind.
That's very clear.
Okay. I'm looking for help, actually. I don't know if my case will fit under ACISTE because I haven't had a near-death experience myself. I had I had an out-of-body experience when I was very young. I got very afraid, but I did it knowing what I was doing by copying my brother that was really into that and all that. So I had many spiritual experiences. I can say I've seen Jesus in real life. Through the experience of losing family members, I have felt their presence, seen them, and also had very vivid dreams. And I know they are real. I have no doubt. And that had happened for a long time. I'm 55 years old now. Never pay attention much to it. Always afraid of it. I feel now that I push it away from me, which I want to embrace it now that I'm more conscious about it. In 2017, one of the sons of my husband died from a drug overdose. I had already been diagnosed with depression. Severe depression back then, now it's being upgraded to treatment-resistant depression. And after he passed away in 2017, I have twins of my own that both with I'm sorry. My twins are 17 years old now. When their stepbrother passed away, although they didn't have a very close relationship because he was older than my twins, but they really knew each other. They went through the trauma with us. And they are special needs, both of them. The boy has Down syndrome, the girl has autism. And I started to think about, how do I normalize this for them? Because they're going to go through it many more times. So I started reading and trying to learn about death. And I came in to the website of IANDS, which to me is fascinating. I found so many things there that I live, although I had never had an NDE. And I got fixated with it for years, listening to stories, reading about it. It was really a lot, to the point that my psychologist asked me to stop. So I found a way to stop. And every once in a while, I do this. Like, this is the second time I participate in a group like this, in a live group. I usually go to videos or recordings and things like that, or the books. I do believe, I'm sorry, it's not that I believe, I know that our consciousness continues. I know we're here for a purpose. I know I chose this path to experience whatever I need to experience. It's been very difficult for me to understand and find out my purpose. What am I meant to do here? I do, and I'm sorry I'm extending myself. One more thing. I do become suicidal at times. I know I'm not gonna do it, because now, like the host mentioned it earlier, Angie, I know better.
Yeah.
But that feeling of ending it all, because I know now the other side is better.
I want to just say, Maria, I am so sorry that you are dealing with, but I think someone like Angie or any person in our directory that you can contact and speak with one-on-one, they will understand you, because you have spiritual experiences and motive. You know these things. I would just say, from my personal experience, that it sounds like you have a very stressful life with your children and you're thinking deeply. And I would start, if what would have helped me at the time is really understanding and feeling the emotion of stress and dealing with that first, because those stress hormones can become so elevated that your body just can't take it anymore. And your body feels down. So then your brain interprets that as being, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't do. And so you're looking intellectually out there, when I think a lot of it, is taking care of your physical self. What would you say, Angie?
Absolutely. I think I'd be happy to speak with Maria offline and go into more detail as to, how she can get some help.
Yeah.
I think this isn't the right place necessarily at this point, because this is really more presentation forum. But I'd be happy to speak with you, Maria, if you'd like to email me.
Yes, thank you very much, both of you.
Absolutely. And I'll put my email in the chat so that you have it in case you don't. So that everybody can do that as well. So, but thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate it. Let's continue the conversation. I do invite people's questions. We're sort of moving to the top of the hour, so we have a little bit more time with Yolaine. I have a couple of questions for you, Yolaine. You were you were Catholic, and then you went through the experience at this high school with the nuns and the priest, and I wish I could have been a fly on the wall. That must have been absolutely amazing, because that's the kind of kid I was as well, but I wouldn't have been so in your face. So I congratulate you. I was just thinking about it, but I wouldn't have been able to speak to the nuns about it in quite the same way. So you became an atheist, understandably, and then you had your near-death experience, but you did see Jesus. So yes. Very interesting. There's a wonderful irony there, isn't there? He's got a great sense of humor. But what do you think was behind that? That it was Jesus himself, nobody else. Was he trying to communicate anything other? Do you think, was there a sort of an ironic message there for you?
Well, I think, people did ask me, so how do you know it was Jesus? And the same way you'd recognize your grandmother or your mother on the street, that's my mother, right? So it was that was him. I would swear a stack of Bibles. I would, that it was him. And that one sentence just answered answered everything for me personally. Don't waste your life thinking you're not loved. And it was my interpretation. Why he came to me, though, I mentioned that I was a very stubborn person. I was very independent. My parents taught us independence. My parents wouldn't help me with homework or anything. You figure it out yourself. They wouldn't tell me a meaning of a word. You look it up yourself. One day we might not be here, and you're going to have to know this. And they'd take us camping, and they'd make us drive, give them directions driving home, and we had to figure everything out ourselves. So I love that, actually. I love that I actually don't do well with authority figures. So I needed someone higher than an earthly authority to get through my stubborn brain. And that did it for me. And I think the spiritual side, they know us. They know what we need, exactly what we need, and they deliver it in a way that we need it to change, be the catalyst for change.
Well, it sounds as though, obviously the other side knows us very, very well. You're obviously very bright, very much an inquiring mind, very stubborn. You've admitted it yourself. It had to come from the head honcho himself, as it were, to sort of get your attention. Anybody else, you might have doubted, right?
That's right. That's right.
Is that really
my grandfather? No, no.
So, but if you heard it from him himself, that sort of stopped you in your tracks, and there you are. Suddenly you're listening to what he has to say. But this meant?
Yeah, it also followed after the light. That I was filled with this full, loving light. So my brain was not in the direction of being critical of that then, and still is not, because that was God to me in that light. And then his son, if you want to call it, as being a manifestation of himself there. Yeah.
So you haven't gone back to Catholicism, because obviously it's never going to be, and it wasn't to begin with, it's never going to be what you were thinking it was. But what is your belief system now? What is your spiritual belief system now that you've had this experience? It's much larger than Catholicism and much larger than any mainline religion, and very different in many ways. But what is your philosophy now as far as what this is all about?
Well, I think of a metaphor of a mountain, and God is up here in the heavens, and we're all on different paths up that mountain. Each of us is on a journey, but we're all created by the same force, the same thing. We all are precious, and we all have a purpose, no matter what religion or belief system we belong to. I think, it's a human need or a spiritual need for us to grow, to advance, to keep learning, whatever it is, to get better, to be, and we fall on those paths, and then we get back up. Some of us get back up, and we just keep up going. So that's basically my idea about it, and that we each have a purpose, and that purpose has to do with love, and that this is a dream. I believe we're in a dream, and we can change our reality by changing our thoughts, changing our consciousness. We can change what happens to it. I didn't go on all the little miracles in my life where you ask yourself, what are the odds of that happening? And my whole life has been that way since my experience, because I see life as a dream. I interpret events like a dream. Even though it's very precious and very real, this is, how we think what happens to us after we die determines a lot how we live our lives.
Absolutely.
Right? And if you're not afraid of death,
you're not afraid of life.
why be afraid of it? You know, when it's our time, it's our time. We're going to go. And then we get to go home again. I can't wait, but I'm not going to do anything because I can't wait to see my husband again. I can't wait to see my mom and dad again. You know, I can't wait to see, you know, experience all of that again. But I know this is a temporary school. And one day I'll get to graduate, and I still have lessons to learn. I still have a purpose as long as I'm here. And I believe everyone does, but they don't know what it is. They lose track of it. And a lot of problems can result when we don't look at the problems, when people don't know what their purpose is and they don't even know what their passion is, what they love.
I think
they don't know the basic thing.
You really hit on something when you were saying earlier that you listen to your body.
Yes.
In other words, if you're doing things in life that are stressing you out,
yes,
it's not right.
Right.
But if you're finding things that give you passion, you know, Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
The idea of following what speaks to you. And you said it beautifully, in service to other people. If you can take that, if you can harness that idea and then package it so it's in service to other people, then you're golden, because you're doing what you're created to do and you're helping others in the process. You're hitting two very important points, which are probably the purpose, right?
Well, that's also I think of doing the arts, creativity. That can be a passion: writing, paintings, music, dance, whatever that creativity that inspires other people. That's also a service, right? And in the same way we can feel tension, we can also feel that bliss. We feel that, you know, it just comes up. Meditation is a good practice for beginning to realize the subtle energies that are happening all the time. You know, they can now measure brain waves and how deep we are into meditation. And we get answers that we normally would never get. We get insights we would normally never get unless we're close to our purer, authentic spiritual self. Anything that's not in alignment with that causes stress, tension. We recognize both fear versus love, you know.
Yeah, as long as the Creator sprinkles us with an assortment of talents, strengths, weaknesses, but the strengths. And then it's our responsibility to tap into those. And if we can tap into them and bring them forward, we're sort of becoming aligned. And maybe that's getting in touch with your higher self, and that's living your full potential. And when you do that, the energy then from the other side flows through you. And then I guess you start to attract blissful things. And that's really the key. But when we deny that aspect of ourselves, we're completely shutting it down.
You know, and stressful things still happen to me all the time. I mean, we're not, the goal is not perfection.
Mm. Right.
The goal is alignment as best we can, you know, keep coming back to it and keep choosing that. And then when we've learned what we came here to learn, then we get to go home. But I was going to say that passion that, like you said, sprinkled, you know, the origins, I don't know where the passion or why we have that particular passion, but I tell you, when you think of your earliest memory, and anybody in the audience can think of this, your earliest memory where you felt fascinated, or you felt you've lost the track of time and you want to just keep doing it. You love doing that. Your earliest memory as a child, when it was unfiltered and no other expectation, just purely you with this activity or this whatever, it is a window into your purpose in the future.
Absolutely, have to fully agree.
It's metaphorical or literal. It is a window.
That's what people
into your
talk about when they talk about the flow, right? Being in the flow, be an athlete,
Yes.
artist, a writer, a singer,
Yeah.
a musician, doesn't matter. Fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
When you're in that, I think that's when you're tapping into what you've been sprinkled with, your particular unique talent that's given to you from the other side, and allowing that force to come through. There's almost a circular movement because it's just coming through you, and everything is in free form and flowing beautifully. Yeah, I have to.
And if the synchronicities are not happening, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong either, because everything happens for a purpose, and it's just how we choose to think about it. The minute we think victim, we're off the track.
Well,
people suffer horrible things at the hands of other people, but it's the identification as a victim. I deserve this, or what did I do wrong about this, or I'm a failure, or, internalizing those external circumstances to oneself. There's where.
Well, and also when you see yourself as the victim, you're stuck.
You're stuck.
It's as though you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
When you're able to kind of grieve that, understand that state, and then you're ready to move on and ready to take responsibility for your part, then you can start to move into feeling better and taking charge of your own life. But it takes people a very long time if they can ever get to that stage, for sure. I was fascinated by one of the things that you were saying, one of the things that Jesus seemed to impart to you, even though maybe not so much in words, but anyway, I picked up the idea that you are not your circumstances, you are not your relationship with your former husband, you are not the infertility that you were suffering at the time, or the anemia. But it's actually, our own responsibility to take charge of our thinking, and that then helped you unlock and move out of your depression. It's almost like the idea that it's our responsibility to keep ourselves happy. Other people can only make us happier. They can't make us happy.
Laugh with you. Yeah, right.
The ones who can make ourselves happy.
You can absorb their energy or take charge of your own.
And, I've been asked to sort of quantify this in my own sort of pedestrian way. I thought, okay, people can make you 20% happier, but 80% of your happiness has to come from you, just to put a number on it, just to really illustrate the importance of keeping ourselves happy and how that's critical to everything.
And now, ask yourself this also. I ask, how do you want to feel most of the time? And I asked when my happy picture was this, and actually happy is predicated on feeling safe, feeling secure, feeling at peace. Without peace, you can't feel happy. So peace is number one for me, serenity like that. And then joy. What brings me joy? Brings me joy is knitting and reading and writing and helping people. That brings me joy. I feel that when I'm doing those things, when I'm expressing that, I feel that coming forth. There is one phrase from the Bible, let your cup, runneth over. And it's like that, you have to fill your own cup with you're precious, and to accept that your life is a precious gift. As I told my student, David, your life is a precious gift. Don't treat it recklessly. So we have a responsibility to treat that gift with respect. So doing harmful things to ourselves is not treating ourselves. So that cup has to be able to fill itself up, and then it can overflow in expression to serve or help others.
We're also becoming much more mindful of the role that our own thoughts play in our mood.
Yes.
Sounds very obvious, but you'd be surprised how we get off track. But the idea that, we follow a good, we know to eat the right kinds of foods, get good sleep, do exercise, but we're not really aware of our own thought diets. and how
No, thought diets, that's good.
thought, junk thoughts, basically. There's a lot of
thoughts are habits. Thoughts are habits. So we tend to think the same thoughts over and over again. And those are often based on beliefs, right? And so we have to examine our beliefs. Why are we thinking that as well? Where is the origin of that belief? Oh, God is punishing me. That's a thought, right? But you believe that God is a bad, he doesn't love us. He's going to punish us. Those false notions that can create all this thought. And so then the interpretation of what happens to us comes from that deep belief. And then we're off track, and then leads to all kinds of negative consequences down the road.
Also, a lot of our thoughts come from childhood or early life, where we see things in certain ways, and we tend to focus on the things negatively. So, somebody might give you 10 compliments, but they find one fault. Most people will focus on the fault and just kind of ruminate on that. And those habits are picked up in childhood, and those are the tapes that we're feeding ourselves. So we become very conscious of our own thought patterns. We have about 60 to 70,000 extraneous thoughts on average, on a daily basis. If you just capture some of those and actually label them, is this positive, is this negative, you'd find that for most people who are unhappy, the majority of the thoughts are negative. And is it any wonder then that their mood spirals and that they go into a dark place? So we need to sort of get a handle on that to help ourselves.
I would only put one caveat. I would not label thoughts as positive versus negative.
Okay.
But true or false, true or not accurate.
Well, I was going to.
If you say, "Oh, everybody loves me," no, not everybody does love me. It's not true. It's just positive, right? So I think accurate versus inaccurate, or truthful versus.
And then, of course, it's about rewriting the narrative. Where do thoughts come from, and is that actually, did my second grade teacher, was she really right when she told me that I stank at math? No, not really. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe in that particular moment for that particular exercise, but that doesn't mean that you're a failure for the rest of your life. But we tend to hang on to those. We're running out of time. I do want to ask you a little bit about the after-death communication, about the deathbed lucidity moments, and using all the jargon that you'll recognize. But I love all of that because that gives people tremendous hope. So how fantastic that Dave does communicate with you, the mountains, and that you prayed for that, and that he was starting to see mountains. Has he, do you want to mention a couple of others in the last few minutes, other communications you've had?
One other one. And then, you said people had questions. I'm willing to stay on to answer a question.
Sure, nobody's coming forward with questions.
Nobody? Okay.
At the moment, so. So I'm asking the questions.
Okay, good. So I was still grieving, and this time I'm back upstairs in my bedroom. And I mentioned that Dave loved music, and I do as well. I mean, music is one way to tune in, to listen. How does music affect you, right? And so I have playlists of how I want to feel. So if I want to feel triumphant, I have music that helps me feel, I'm triumphant. I have music that gives me energy to do the chores, clean the windows, or, I do this. I listen to motivating music, or I have music that want to calm me down. I have music to just meditate, music to just for fun, to dance, I have music that I want, I need grit right now. I'm going to work my way through this, and so all those music that helps me anyway. So I'm grieving, right? And I said, I wonder if there are any songs, if there's any music that can help me with grief. And sure enough, Google had a whole list of songs, and I read through that. No, just by the title, like Time to Say Goodbye, forget about it. He's not God. He's not, he's in a different form. I'm not saying goodbye. So I dismissed that. But then I said, I wonder what this is. Phil Collins, You'll Be in My Heart.
Oh.
So I listened to that, and I just started bawling in a good way, not grief, but gratitude bawling. It was every single word I needed to hear. And then I watched it on YouTube, Phil Collins singing it. And oh my God, he looked like my husband. And he's coming through a tunnel of light. But when you listen to the first time, you don't get like this is a near-death experience. This is a spiritual side talking to the survivors, right? But it is. It's the loved ones left behind. That's the message. You'll be in my heart. And he's talking from the other side. And there are all these different scenes. And I'm bawling like, oh my God, you're doing it again, Dave. This is exactly, every single message in there had contained meaning. And then in the end, they showed a picture of hands of light, like opening up like this and light coming, streaming out from there. And I have a picture that I had painted of my husband's hands, exactly like that, because he had beautiful hands, and I wanted to paint them. And I put light streaming out from under exactly that picture.
Amazing.
So it got me way more than what I asked for.
Wonderful. Oh, we have another question here. How do you open yourself up to guidance from those who have passed or those in the spirit world? For example, spirit angels or spirit guides?
So I have not. I tried to. I said, I wonder, you read about mediums, and, I've always been fascinated with mediums and people who can connect. And I asked, and oftentimes I'll get the answer in a feeling, or I will get it in a image, like a metaphor. Rarely words that I will get instantaneous. I trust the first thing that comes up when I get in the state of now, relaxed now. And I ask a question, and then it comes up. So I asked myself, why can't I see or talk to other spirits? And immediately I got in words, not your purpose.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. You have another purpose. Fair enough.
I have another purpose. I got enough to do, I guess.
Yes, you have enough to do. So very quick, final question. Maria's asking, have you gotten any nickels from Dave?
Yes, I have to tell you. Yeah, I get nickels. I get good dimes and quarters too, but mostly,
Let him send you some quarters. Good.
Yeah, my son finds them too. Dave's son.
Yes.
Finds nickels.
Yes.
I told him that story. He wasn't present when his dad passed, but he gets nickels.
Does your mom ever contact you?
No.
No. Okay.
No, just the pennies. I know those are from her because she used to sing pennies from heaven to me. Well, a lot of people get pennies, right? But I find them one time I was on a train and I went to the bathroom and I came back and there's a penny in the middle of my seat. I mean, nobody sat in my seat and left a penny. I mean, it just, yeah, I know that's my mom.
Sometimes I've heard that people will find pennies, or pennies have been left for them, and they'll look at the date if you can read it because it's so tiny. Yeah, they'll look at the year rather.
Yeah.
And often it's a year that is, a key year for the family or that individual. they'll do that too. So it's
Yeah,
more
I've done
special.
that yet. Haven't found any meaning in the dates yet. But
Okay. Well, we're actually at the end of our time now, pretty much. So I just wanted to say thank you so very much for a lovely presentation this afternoon.
thank you, Angie. Thanks for inviting me.
Interesting and lots of insights. And I think you're spot on, as with what you're telling us as far as, looking for our own happiness, changing our perspective. I think a lot of it, when you were speaking about that, a lot of it is A Course in Miracles, which, purportedly was channeled through Helen Schucman from Jesus. And that so much has to do with how we look at the world, that this is an illusion, this is a dream, that there's a much bigger reality, that we're here for a reason. And if we can just detach, we should be happier than we are. We shouldn't take it quite so seriously. So thank you so very much for everything. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Angie.
And I want to say thank you to everybody who's joined us. And Maria, please email me. I hope you saw my email. It's angiewq09@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you and anyone who wants to email me. Thank you so much, Yolaine. Take care. I'll see you soon.
Right.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Getting an applause on this end. Bye-bye. See you. Standing ovation almost. Bye.